All right, let's do this De La Vega agenda. The De La Vega is a bust agenda that was also out. In
I think we should
force.
have Jeremiah.
Jeremiah, what are your De La Vega thoughts?
I think it's hard to get away from the idea that this was a bust of a season. That doesn't make it a bust of a sign. I mean, there's a lot invested in this guy. I think we'll get a much better idea next year. He's clearly gained some fitness. He's stronger. I think that was maybe one thing that he came in, and what I heard repeatedly was that he just was not up to the physical challenges of MLS, and that I don't know. And I think it's worth unpacking and digging into as to like were the Sounders caught off guard by that, because they seemingly scouted this guy a lot.
Yeah.
They should have known what his physical limitations were, but either way, I won't be surprised if he comes in next year and he has a good year. And then if he struggles again next year, then we start talking about, is this guy a bust? I don't really see the larger, like there's not really a lot of value in discussing if a guy is a bust who you signed to be a long-term player after his first year.
I think he had a bad season.
He had a bad season, and I think that you could say that this was even a waste. You could even argue that it was a wasted season.
Yeah.
But I'm not at all close ready. I'm
never gonna call anyone a bust when like injuries are that big a factor.
Right.
Like if he had played 2K minutes this year and still had 1 goal, 1 assist, and was out there every week, I'd be like, yeah, the bust narrative has more legs than I would care to acknowledge. But like he really just now in the last like month got to something approaching full fitness.
I think he's made strides, but I still don't even think he's there yet, because like I saw Brian yelling at him during the match, like when he basically kind of gave up on a play and then the Galaxy got on a break. It was eventually stopped, but I mean, I could tell Brian was absolutely pissed because he just stopped. He didn't try and track back. That's not the type of player that, Brian is fond of. I'm not saying that's the type of player Pedro De La Vega is, and I'm not saying that he's like unfit, but I don't know. I don't want to not be hopeful, but it just like this season really just made me feel like
he's got a lot to prove next year. I think he's got more to prove next year than any Sounder ever.
Yeah, and that's and he already.
I thought you were going to say on the team currently, but I think you're right.
I think you're right.
I mean, I don't know. Like it's like Dempsey. Like I guess you could maybe like Dempsey was not great his first year here, and I guess they probably ended up playing about the same number of minutes. But there was no doubt that Dempsey was a good player.
Exactly. Yeah. He was so established already as a player that you knew was going to produce.
Like you just knew he was going to come through.
Yeah, like this is it's kind of again, this is maybe a topic for another day, but like it's kind of made me think about the wisdom of investing, like making young DPs, like putting so much of a centerpiece kind of pressure on a young DP.
I mean, that's the challenge,
you're playing a
right?
dangerous game because like those bust at a higher rate, and no matter how convicted you are in the signing, it can still happen. Like when Ladero came in, he was the Boca's number 10. You already kind of there was less risk involved with that because there's already so much. It wasn't hedging on upside. It was something that was already.
You were buying and I guess that was maybe the challenge was that they were sort of trying to split the difference between buying someone who had a decent resume, but who had this real upside. Mm-hmm. And the upside, we did not see anything close to the upside.
Well, and it also has to do. I mean, we talked about this extensively on a couple. I don't even know how many shows ago. I'm going to use that number again, but how he had the world on his shoulders in terms of pressure. Moved to a new country, immediately gets injured,
right.
Comes back, isn't fit, isn't playing well, is frustrated with himself. That is a spiral. That is a spiral and a spiral and a spiral. And I think Brian and the whole coaching staff and training staff did such a good job to build his confidence back up, build him back up. But it's like that is really hard when, again, like you're saying, he has the most to prove of maybe any young player in the league. Definitely on the Sounders.
And the Sounders. And I go back to this a lot, where I think about the way he carried himself, the way he looked in the season opener, and then early on in that Austin game. he looked confident. He looked ready to go. He was flying all over the field.
Stepped up at LAFC and hit his penalty.
He was hitting passes that were just like, oh, this guy's going to be great. And then the injuries start to happen, and they happen, and it's like he ends up missing, effectively 2 months, and then the road back was slow.
Every time he would come back, he would get hurt again.
Yeah,
right.
That's got to take a mental toll every time.
And he talked about, we talked to him a couple weeks ago, and he sort of talked about how it was. This is a guy who's used to playing 90 minutes, being able to play 90 minutes, and that he wasn't able to do that was taking a toll on its own. And I really don't think until the last couple weeks, or the last couple months, last month of the season, he was feeling anything like himself.
Yeah.
And I think so. It makes it really hard to judge it in a real analytical way, because this is just this offseason is going to be huge for him. I think if he can get his body right, if he comes into preseason next year and he's ready to go, we'll have a much better idea of what he can be.
Pedro, if you want to go and get haircuts together and pod, let's do it. You can pick my haircut.
That's a good offer.